And over the course of those 5 to 7 weeks, we demonstrated that we saw a 9% improvement in free throws, a 9% improvement in three-point shots. We saw a 12% faster reaction time and a 4% increase in faster sprint time. And so these were the quantification, which was novel at the time, was what was quite fascinating because it wasn't that 1% that I think many elite athletes are trying to find every small way to adjust their training to get that 1% better, because in elite sport, that 1% can be the difference, right, of being at the top versus not. But this was arguably 9% or even double digits for reaction time, depending on the outcome. And so we've expanded that looking at other sports as well, but this was one of the first ones to show that it really potentially could have a significant impact on performance outcome for these athletes.
How much did they sleep more per night to get those results?
Yeah, so they did. So we did quantify objectively through a what's called actigraphy. It looks like a wearable nowadays, and then compared that also with what they thought they were getting. And so we did extend their sleep substantially over, I believe, an hour and a half compared to what they were getting prior to the study.
Because getting 9% more free throws or three-point shots or 12% better reaction time is, quite frankly, for some teams, the difference between like winning a championship and not.
Yeah.
Because I think about the Premier League often, which is it's soccer, I guess, football. Oftentimes, there's been leagues within my lifetime, there's been years in my lifetime where both teams have tied with the same amount of points, and one is won just on the amount of goals they've scored. They've just scored a couple more goals. So after 38 games, they both have the exact same points, and the winner is just the person that's scored like a couple more goals. Mm-hmm. But even you think of reaction times, you think of goalkeepers in soccer, their whole game is reaction time. So if you can increase your reaction time by 12%, it's really, really staggering.
It can be a game changer. And I think that's what has been so fascinating with some of the athletes or organizations and teams I've worked with who have made it to the most important games and those championships, because the hope is that you've invested not just the night before that championship game, but you've invested an entire season, even starting in the off season, on cultivating better habits to give yourself that foundation and be able to leverage these strategies that the other team is not, because we know that it significantly can impact not just the individual level on performance outcome, but organizations as a whole. And I think one example of that is I partnered with ESPN to do what was called the NBA Schedule Alert Project, where they asked, can you predict, Dr. Ma, when NBA teams are going to be at risk of losing games strictly based on the schedule? So not factoring in strength of team, but based simply on their schedule, where they're traveling to, how many time zones they're crossing, these various factors. Does it affect organizations as a whole and teams and their game outcomes, as you mentioned? And over 3 seasons, I was 76 to 86% correct on accurately predicting when an NBA team will be at highest risk of losing strictly based on the schedule. So in the spirit of the project, we didn't factor in strength of team. But to me, that was staggering, because there's many other factors that maybe are not always considered to be as clearly important about this travel schedule up front, but hey, maybe these factors really do play and influence game outcomes in this way. And that's not the only thing that has obviously shown that organizations and teams as a whole will have differences in performance outcome. There's other studies like the Monday Night Football study that showed if you simply bet on a West Coast team when they play an East Coast, West Coast matchup during night games, over 25 seasons, you'd beat the Las Vegas point spread 68% of the time. And so if you're able to predict with greater accuracy, then obviously there is potentially some good gambling outcomes that could work in your favor here.